Today our guest is Benjamin K. Richmond, better known as Ben Richmond. He is president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League. I'm going to read a bit of his bio to you. It's rather eclectic, so hang on and we're in for a ride. He was born in North Carolina to a Methodist minister. Richmond was schooled in Mississippi and grew up in the 1950s South. He received a bachelor's degree from Tougaloo, I hope I pronounced that right, College in Mississippi, and a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Bet you did not know this tidbit. Richmond is a classically trained vocalist who went on to a career in music. Richmond was then able to travel through Europe on an exchange fellowship with the Northwest German Music Academy. After spending 7 years in Europe, Richmond returned to the U.S. and began his Urban League career in 1979, working with the Urban League in Madison, Wisconsin. From 1982 to 1987, he served for 5 years as president and CEO of the Battle Creek Area Urban League in Battle Creek, Michigan. And then in 1987, Richmond became president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League. Now, the mission of the Louisville Urban League is to assist African American and disadvantaged persons in the achievement of social and economic equality, primarily through education, employment, housing, family development, and community development. During his Louisville tenure, he has established the Rebound Housing Development Project, expanded the League's training and workforce development, and fostered the growth of minority businesses and entrepreneurs. In addition, he completed a $1.2 million capital campaign and oversaw construction of a new league headquarters. But in 2004, he was named Louisvillian of the Year by the Ad Federation of Louisville, and in 2005 he received the Champions of Children Award by the Jefferson County Public Schools, and in 2007 Louisville Metro Mayor Jerry Abramson announced Richmond as the recipient of Louisville Metro's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Award, which recognizes citizens that have dedicated their lives to promoting justice, peace, freedom, nonviolence, racial equality, and civic activism. Abramson said, quote, "Over his decades of leadership, countless lives have been improved through Ben's tireless efforts in workforce development, housing, and youth programs, and through forging partnerships with the business community." Upon his acceptance, Richmond stated, quote, "My parents were very involved in the struggle for civil rights, and times were much more difficult for them, especially during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I feel a great deal of responsibility to be a steward for their work and the values and principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who stood for peace, racial equality, and worked to make the world a better place for everyone. We have done well, but we still have much more to do." Currently, Richmond serves on the board of directors for the Fund for the Arts, the Spirit of Louisville Foundation Bell Awards, Greater Louisville Inc., which is the Metro Chamber of Commerce, and the University of Louisville Board of Overseers, and the Metropolitan Sewer District of Louisville, Jefferson County, and he is a member of Broadway Temple Zion Church, the Rotary Club of Louisville, and the NAACP. Welcome, Mr. Richmond, to the Leadership Landscape.
Thank you.
Thanks
Kirt.
for letting me read that bio. It's quite eclectic to go from a vocalist to the head of a Louisville Urban League. It's quite a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a great experience.
Could you, before we go into our general questions for the interviews that we do with our guests, could you elaborate and describe a little bit the mission of the Urban League, maybe on a national or Louisville level?
Well, you captured it toward the
Okay.
end there. And here in Louisville, we have a mission that says to assist African Americans, other minority groups, and the disadvantaged to achieve social and economic equality. And what we mean by that, and I think the key word, social and economic equality, equity, social justice issues, and we don't do that just by advocacy. We do it by direct services. And so our mission is to help those groups, African Americans, other minorities, and the disadvantaged, those who are poor, those who are economically disabled, to enter the mainstream, to be a part of the economic and social mainstream of our community. That's in education, that's in business, and to upgrade their quality of life. And along the way, we get involved in a whole array of issues. Nowadays, we say diversity.
Right.
Making sure that our community is reflective of its diversity throughout the length and breadth, whether it's at the higher end level, in the middle. And so we want to open doors. The National Urban League has a very similar mission. It focuses exclusively on African Americans.
Okay.
That's its niche in the marketplace. Here locally, we have to be broader. We just cannot focus on one group. but we look at all people who are economically disadvantaged. Our history lie out of the African American experience, coming out of the 1800s into the 1900s. And so ultimately we want to see a level playing field where people can economically participate with a good job, a good career, have a good income for that family, loving, nurturing environment. Home ownership is very important. And we want to see people start out maybe in an apartment with a family and then learn how to own their own home and ultimately grow their wealth. And so our mission is to open doors, build bridges among people of diverse backgrounds, whether it's poor toward wealth. And so it's a broad mission. You can work on it morning to night.
Well, that leads us into our first question. What drives you to do what you're doing with the Urban League? I mean, to go from a music background to this.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
It was even interesting for me, it wasn't planned.
Sure.
And I don't, as the things I've done over time, I don't think they were all never planned. It's kind of like being in the right place at the right time. And this was all about timing. It was January of the year when I returned from Europe. I was looking to get me a professorship at some college or university, and I learned that you don't do that in January.
Yeah.
You do it in the spring of the year, and that's when colleges and universities are out looking to fill positions. So in the meantime, I was here. I had about 6 months before I could look for something in the field of music, and came in contact with the Urban League through a friend, through an acquaintance. And I went to the Urban League to have them to help me to find a job, something that would tie me from over that 6 months while I was in Madison, Wisconsin. And went there, and lo and behold, there was a position open. And someone said, you should apply for that. And I followed that person's suggestion, and within a few weeks, I was employed by the Urban League. But I was very inspired when I got into the Urban League and found out what it was all about, and the job that I was doing, and working with people, helping people to prepare for employment was back in that time. And I was working with some young ex-offenders, well, actually young. They were in their 20s and their 30s. And these men were recently released from prison. And my job was to work with them on their resume, help them to transition back into the community with housing. And so we helped one young man get a job, and just his enthusiasm and he was so happy that just took effect. And I think I found a calling there.
I think you have.
Yeah.
It's funny how things work from a higher power, if you will.
Yes, sure.
Whom do you credit most influential in your life?
Well, there are many people
throughout
my life that have had an influence on me and what I do. I guess the two people that have had the greatest, and still have the greatest because they're still with us, and that's my parents, my mother and my father. Dad is 91, Mom is 88.
Still here.
Yeah, very alert mind, and very much into their work, which is their church work. They're guided by that. So those are the two, and through the years. But as I went from high school to college, in my college experience, there were two people that had a great influence on me at the time. And that was my music professor, Dr. Ariel Lovelace. And then there was a man over in the social service department. His name was Dr. Bobo Berinsky. I never
forget that name.
Yeah, right. Bobo Berinsky was a little short man, but he was always pushing us to do our best, and always challenging us to think broader, about issues, And so, but then I went on to college to teach school for a while, and there was a man named Walter Washington, big, tall man.
All these alliterations, BB, WW.
Yeah, right, right. Walter Washington. And Walter Washington had an enormous influence on me in terms of getting a master's degree. He motivated me by saying, if you don't show me that you in somebody's graduate school by the end of the year, I'm not going to renew your contract.
There you go.
You know, so
Yeah,
that was
you're like,
motivation.
well,
yeah,
yeah.
right. You know, there was always some motivation there, and so there were a lot of people throughout my career that have inspired me and have motivated me. You know, to want to be successful.
What was the most defining moment of your life? It could be professional or personal.
Well, again, I can't think of any one period. There were always transitions in my life, and it seems like they were always transitioning to a broader and better experience. When I graduated from college, from college in '65, I had no idea that I was going to end up teaching in a community college that had a high school on the campus, and that was with Dr. Washington. And all of a sudden, I was 20, 21 years old, and I was teaching students,
wow,
although music, that were almost my same age, you know, and I had to learn to manage that with them. And then when I went to grad school, I went from Mississippi all the way to Wisconsin, Madison, the University of Wisconsin, and I had never been in an all-white situation.
Okay.
And had to adjust. I was on an all-black situation growing up in Mississippi, and my world was, with the exception of Tougaloo, which was integrated, it was all black. And so I went there at the encouragement of Dr. Washington and his wife, and it was a great experience. But to adjust. And it was very difficult musically speaking, because those kids, man, they could hear the tone when it falls on cotton. When the pen falls on cotton, they can tell you what
really?
frequency. Well, they were bright. They were real smart.
So
that was a great experience. And then when I went to Europe in 1972, couldn't speak German, and that was a real defining moment. You know. How do I go to another country that I don't speak the language and exceed and be successful? And that was great. I learned a lot, you know. So there were always moments of transition, you know, that I would say were defining for me, rather than just any one thing.
Okay. If there is one, Mr. Richmond, what is your biggest professional regret? In other words, is there something you would have done differently? It can always be professional or personal.
Well, regret. I don't know if
it's always a strong word, but it's
yeah, right. I think I might would have done something differently along the way. I'm a little older now, and I like to think I was a little smarter. I think that if there were maybe one thing, I think I would have had a family when I was younger. You know, and I think I would have taken the time to develop that part of my life. You know, now I say all of my kids. You know, kids come to the Urban League. We have a growing youth development program, and I see kids coming through, and while I don't interact with them one-on-one always, I know we are responsible for them. We are responsible for making sure that they get the kind of counseling, leadership training, life experience, exposures at the league and in other places, you know. So. But if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have looked at that a whole lot different.
Okay. What do you find exciting about all of this? I mean, you had that music career. You've stayed with the Urban League.
Well, I found all of this, the Urban League work. I found music all very energizing. And when I was in the music field, when I went to Europe, I had a professor. And professors over there, they treat you like their own, really. And his name was Professor Helmut Kretschmar. I never will forget him. And he was a motivator, and he was an energizer, you know. And he was always looking for perfection, you know. He always wanted you to hear it, and if you hear it, then you can do it.
Okay.
You know. And that was energizing. And that same kind of energy I found in the Urban League movement. and when we're trying to better the quality of life for people, and you can go from the individual all the way out to the whole community.
Okay.
And trying to help that person to be economically stable and looking at that person and seeing what their needs are, coming up with what we call an individual development plan. It might be certain counseling, and then you get into the whole employability skills and
Right.
continuing education, getting that first job, working with them through their first job, and then helping them to qualify for another job. So that's a whole process. And then getting out into the community, dealing with community issues. I found it very, very energizing.
What was the best advice ever given to you, Mr. Richmond? And it could be more than one piece of advice.
Well, my dad always said, be a good person.
Okay.
You know, be a good person. Treat the other person the way you want to be treated.
Okay.
Be honest, and live a good Christian life. Now, that's the basics. But along the way, I think to be tenacious.
Okay.
And have a certain stick-to-itness. And I remember a professor friend of mine from University of Wisconsin, his name was Dr. Robert Monsheen. I never forget Dr. Monsheen because it was difficult trying to integrate, if you will, into the school life at University of Wisconsin School of Music. And Dr. Monsheen kept saying, Ben, you can do it. You know, you can do it. You know, you just have to be tenacious about it. And but words like that, you know, Dr. Washington, when he said that, you know, you got to make sure you go on and get that advanced degree. You know, that was a great piece of advice. I don't think if he hadn't told me that, I think I would have just taught school.
Yeah.
I don't think I never would have gone.
Can change.
Right. I never would have gone beyond Mississippi. Mississippi was very interesting. When I came along in 1961, 65, we couldn't go to the University of Mississippi to graduate school.
Really?
So if you want to get a master's degree in music now, you had to leave the state.
Okay.
And so that's why I ended up in Wisconsin. It's not because I wanted to go north.
Right,
you know.
right.
But
Wow, things have changed.
and I applied all over the Northeast and in the Midwest, and Wisconsin was the first school to accept me, and several others came on later on. But I was excited about just being accepted. But Mississippi was back in that day. I mean, we couldn't go to graduate school. Now there were some state colleges like Jackson State University in my hometown did have a master's program in education.
Okay.
Because the way out in the South, the days of old, was through education. My mother told my three of us, my brother and my sister, that you're going to go to school and you're going to get a teaching degree. You're going to go to school, you're going to get a teaching degree. And she knew that was the way out. She didn't say you were going to go to school and become a doctor, but she knew that if we went to school and got a teaching education degree, that would be a way out. And so, and that's what we did. I went to Tougaloo College, and my mother didn't rest until she knew that I was doing my student teaching, and my dad. And so I came out with a Bachelor's of Science in Education, music ed, back in that day. And so I don't think if Dr. Washington hadn't challenged me to go to graduate school, and then I began to explore that, I don't think I would ever left Mississippi. I wouldn't have left as soon as I did. And I wouldn't have been exposed to a Big Ten setting like in Wisconsin. I don't think I would have gone on to do the other things so.
Our next question is do you think there's a difference today, Mr. Richmond, in our leaders than there was in past generations? Do you think they embrace diversity more? Do you think it's kind of an open-ended question, really?
Well, I think that the issues today are different than they were 20, 30 years ago. I think that life is a lot more complex today.
Technology.
Technology. And a lot of doors were opened in the 60s with all the civil rights legislation, affirmative action in the 70s.
Right.
And so today things are much more institutional.
Okay.
I think you have to be I think a lot more alert, a lot more smarter, if you will, to find those things that that need to be addressed, and I think there are two ways to do it. You can be very direct and forceful, or you can seek to have some dialogue and talk about the issue and to find some solutions.
Okay.
And I think that method is, while it's not always easy, is one that I think that works well. Maybe better. I can't say better, but because I think to be direct and as an activist, be a burr under the saddle, if you will, to make your point. But then somebody has to come along and say, now, what are the solutions here? You know, what would really work? What would take to make it work? And then who's going to do the work? You know. So I think that things have changed. Issues are different today than, and I think to lead today, it's just not one person.
Okay.
I think it's a lot of people. It might start out with one person, but before it's over with, it's going to be several people or organizations around the table. I don't think that we might see another Martin Luther King, but I think it's going to be a while. Or a John Kennedy, or an Eleanor Roosevelt. You know, there were some real issues back in that time to address, not only just racial lines, but also economic lines. Right. You know, and there are a lot more opportunities nowadays to get an education. It's helping people to better understand how to work with people, helping our educators to understand how to educate all children, regardless of what environment they might come out of.
What have you.
Yeah, right. A home life, you know, that every kid can achieve at his or her maximum. And so, that's I think the leadership styles have to be a lot more inclusive, if you will. When you forge off and say, I want to do that, you have to look, who am I going to partner with? Who am I going to collaborate with to get this done? You know, and so that's a little different.
And we're running a little short of time here, but I want to get a last couple questions in here. If you could change, if you were granted, 2 weeks right today, no obligations, no commitments, how would you spend that 2 weeks? Minimum vacation, you know, put the cell phone down, email, no computer.
I don't
take
know.
family with or without in 2 weeks and see you in 14 days. What would you do?
Well, I would probably find 4 or 5 people, you know, that was just want to get in the car and go.
There you go.
Yeah, right. Want to go, and no agendas.
All right.
You know, and
I like that.
And just hang out.
Yeah.
And do stuff that could be intellectual, maybe.
Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
It's a government show now.
Yeah, right. I mean,
show,
we're off the clock.
Right,
you know, we're off the clock. I mean, you know,
right.
So we might go straight to the ocean.
Okay.
You know, and I do like historic things. I do like visiting historical kind of things. You know, and just milling around.
Sure.
I was in Washington, I guess a couple of months ago, and I had a couple of hours, and I just enjoyed walking around, looking at people, you know, watching people and just milling around. So I would probably go to some water area, ocean,
all right.
and I was in South Carolina, Charleston, you know, back in January, and I just found that a fascinating place. To go and learn about that community and that culture there, you know. But also, I can end up being a couch potato.
At least you're honest. It's
Well,
on
yeah, I
tape
mean,
now,
you know,
so-
the work is so energizing,
Right.
and I have been blessed to be very excited about the work of the Urban League. Because it involves so many different things working in our community. In the morning, I can be downtown with a business group talking about various issues, and I'm always talking about the inclusive side of the business. You know, well, let's make sure we do this and let's make sure we do that. But at the end of the day, I could be somewhere out in another part of town, you know, interacting with people that where the rubber really hits the road, you know, and I find that very, very energizing. You know, I think that enthusiasm and having passion for what you do is the key often to success.
Okay, yeah,
You know,
makes sense.
it's the key often to success. I think you find problems through positiveness. Even the situation might be negative. You know, I look for a silver lining
Okay.
in there. You know, it might be
So every
chaotic.
problem has a solution, maybe?
Every problem, well, ultimately, now, you know, you dream.
Yeah.
You know, I do like to think I'm a dreamer.
Yeah.
You know, and ask what is, and just say why not. You know, it can't happen. You know, and so I don't operate on the negative.
Okay.
Yeah, I might complain, but it's only going to be for a minute.
Sure.
And I want to see, okay, now what makes this work? Let's get on with the business.
I got you.
Yeah.
One final question, and we're running very short on time. We ask this of all our guests, when the young or old, when the great day comes, Mr. Richmond, how do you want to be remembered? You know, God forbid.
Oh,
you
I
walk
don't
out
know
of here
that. I
at the
saw
next
your
meeting.
question.
Yeah, you see it?
I saw your question.
We
on
ask
that.
everybody
You know,
that.
yeah, right. I saw your question on that. You know, you know, the Urban League in this town was led by a great man, Art Walters.
Okay.
I never wanted to let Mr. Walters down. I didn't want to let anybody down. I never wanted to let the Urban League down, the board down, the community down. So I like to think that over these times that we have stayed the course, and we have gradually gotten better and better in terms of our service.
Okay.
And if somebody looks back over their shoulder and say, well, he did a very good job, or a good job, doesn't have to be a good job of maintaining a strong Urban League in Louisville, I'll be at peace.
That's great. On that note, we're going to end. It's quite a pleasure to have you, Mr. Richmond.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being on Leadership Landscape.